Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Fit Couch Podcast. Today, I'm really excited to introduce a new guest who's got a great story. You guys are going to love this story. Lots of great information from this guy. And I think we might be able to touch on some topics outside of fitness. We worry about fitness and our physical health, and hopefully we can dive into really opening up our eyes to how we can advance our spiritual health as well. So I'd like to introduce Calvin.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right, Calvin.
Thank you for this opportunity, man.
Yeah, no, thank you for coming. This is
Absolutely.
great. I've been excited about this. So maybe we can kick this off and you can share a little bit about what it is you do, like what your full-time gig is, and then we'll kind of go from there.
For sure. Yeah, so I'm a Christian motivational speaker. So I travel both within the States and outside of the States, just sharing like how people can find freedom in their life and understand who they truly are. But not only that, I also reach an audience that is not Christian as well, where it's just like understanding their identity and who they are. And so that's pretty much what I'm doing full time. And I actually have a podcast as well.
Oh, okay,
so I have
cool.
a podcast with a co-host.
Make sure you shout that out. What is it?
Yeah, it's called Go Beyond Podcast.
Go Beyond. All right.
Go
Make
Beyond
sure you guys
Podcast.
subscribe.
Yeah. And it's on YouTube. That's where our focus is. And he actually is a speaker as well.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah, that's what we do full time.
Nice.
Yeah.
Full-time speaking, huh?
Yeah.
Man, I wish I got paid just to talk. I'd be making a lot of money. I talk too much. So, as far as the Christian thing, were you a speaker before you became a Christian motivational speaker, or did it all happen at once? Like, share with me a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, so I actually have a pretty crazy journey from 2012 to 2015. No, rewind. 2010 to 2012, end of 2012, I worked in Hollywood.
Oh.
So I worked in Hollywood for 2.5, almost 3 years. And what I was doing there, I was doing so much. Production assistant, behind the scenes, videography is something that I got into towards the end. And then after that, like, I've always been Christian. I grew up Christian, but it was more Christian by name rather than by, like, true action and belief.
Nice, yeah.
And so I started realizing that, hey, you know what? I want to take this to the next step. So then in 2012, I actually started speaking.
So I'm going to rewind you really quick. So
Yeah.
you were working in Hollywood and you were working on sets of movies?
Yeah.
What are some of the movies you worked on?
So I didn't work on any films directly, but I worked on Lexus commercial, 2012 hatchback Lexus commercial.
Oh, cool.
I worked on a Hulu series, which before Hulu was even like popular.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
when I first got the opportunity, I was like, oh, who cares about Hulu? Like, I want a bigger opportunity.
Yeah.
But that was like the most notable things that I did is I did a couple of Hulu series, worked on a Lexus commercial. I did behind the scenes for like Lil Wayne and bigger like rappers and stuff like that.
Nice.
CeeLo Green. And then I transitioned after that season.
So what changed you the season in your life to shift from Hollywood to what you're doing now?
Yeah. You know, the crazy thing is, I actually had this crazy dream. I was doing like this summer program where pretty much it's a group of young people. They go into the community, they reach people with the gospel. And I remember like on the 8th week, the program is 10 weeks long. On the 8th week, I had this crazy dream.
Huh.
And this dream, like in the dream, you ever had those dreams where you go to sleep and while you're sleeping, you get into this dream, you know it's a dream, and you say it's a dream, but it doesn't feel like a dream?
Yes.
You ever had that?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So like I'm sitting in this dream, and I actually said in the dream, this is a dream. And then like I didn't wake up, so I was like, oh dang, this must be real life. And in the dream, I was like climbing this journey in Hollywood. And I had just left to do like this service with God. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to go back. Because I actually had an opportunity or a potential opportunity. I was in talks with working on Avatar 2 as a production assistant. Not in the movie, but even just having my name on the credits. People were like, bro, you would go to the next level. So I was in that process. And while I was in that process, what ended up happening is I got this dream. And the dream picked up where I left off in Hollywood. And then there were a group of guys that came by. They were like, hey, hop in. Jesus is returning. We're going to be saved. And so I'm like, all right, cool. So I hop into this truck. And then we pull up on this hill. And when we pull up on the hill, we lean back. And I remember it like yesterday. We're leaning back on this hill. and we're in a green Ford Explorer. That's how vivid it was. And I'm sitting there, and like we see this appearance of like Jesus coming, and then I'm like, man, everything just hit me that I was raised with. Everything, like every Christian principle that I could think of, and I was just like, oh man. And I turned to the guys. I hop out the truck. I slam the door, and I'm like, you guys are so foolish. We're gonna be saved if we're in this vehicle or outside of this vehicle. And so then I turn around, and when I turn around, I see like my grandma on this hill. My grandma, she was alive at this point. And I see her on this hill, and she's like, the Lord is returning. She's like praising God. He's returning. And I go run up to her. And I say, yeah, Jesus is coming. We're going to be saved. And she says to me with the most solemn look, she looks at me and she says, I'm sorry, but probation has closed. And I was like, oh my goodness, like, no. I start running down this hill, and as I'm running down the hill, I feel like I'm running really fast, but like the energy of my body is being drained by like the presence of God or something. And then I wake up.
Wow.
And I was like, oh snap, this is not the right path. So I started praying. I was like, all right, God, look, I started in Hollywood when I was 18. This is all I really know. So this is the path that I'm going to go on. However, if you want me to transition from this path, you need to open doors that no man can close and close doors that no man can open. When that took place...
So this is like a prayer.
This is my prayer, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So when that took place, things were moving like super quick.
In Hollywood?
No, in my personal life.
Oh, okay.
This program that I joined is 10 weeks long. I have this dream around week 8.
Yeah.
2 weeks, I'm going back to Hollywood. That's all I really knew. And so when that happened, God just started moving.
Wow.
And a Bible college reached out to me and said, hey, are you interested in going to, we'd love to have you strengthen and grow your leadership and all these things. And I was like, man, I'm not going to no Bible college. I'm not interested in a Bible college. Like, that's just not happening. Long story short, I graduated from the Bible college. And
it's funny, yeah, like, God had different plans than you did.
100%.
Huh? Yeah.
But it was a game changer. And then I saw the freedom of what it was like to actually understand who I am. And I was like, dude, I got to share this with the world.
Wow. So this was like the catalyst for projecting you in the area that you're doing now.
100%.
Wow. So share. I know this is probably a long story, but maybe you can give us a little snippets of your journey of finding like what your identity is, and maybe share with us what that looks like.
Yeah.
What that looks like to you.
Yeah, for sure. So when it comes to identity, society is made up of people that have identities. If you actually just look around at society, you'll see, and you walk around, everyone identifies as something. Some people identify as their job title. Mm-hmm. Right? You meet some people and it's like, hey, how's it going? My name's Calvin. Nice to meet you. Oh, nice to meet you. My name's James. I'm the CEO of this. Right? We always jump to these certain things to say this is who we are, to define who we are. And so I started realizing that like some people, they lean towards their job title as their identity, or they lean towards the streets or their upbringing. This is who I'm from. Like I was just talking to a friend today, and we were talking about the term that people say, the streets raised me.
Yeah.
Right? They identify with that. Or if I left this gang, I would be nothing. I identify as that. And so over and over, our identity is wrapped up in something. And it comes from a process that is developed over the years. And I like to use Ben Carson. When you look at Ben Carson, are you familiar with Ben Carson?
Yeah.
Okay, when you look at Ben Carson, if you look at his story, he actually used to think he was extremely dumb. He used to think he was so stupid. If you watch his movie, like the movie actually starts with him just being a failure. I'm going to be no one. The shift that happened was his mom letting him know that that's not your identity. And so Ben Carson is in school. He's being called by all these kids dumb and stupid. And he came home one day and he was telling his mom, that's who I am. I'm just dumb. I'm stupid. Now you look at this guy. He's, from my understanding, the only person that has disconnected Siamese twins that were connected by brain and actually lived. Like the guy has gone on to do incredible things simply because his mom came in and re-identified who he is. And he ran with that. And he was just like, that's truly who I am, rather than who I was, who I thought I was, which is dumb, which is stupid. And the crazy thing is, just from those things that his mom pumped into his head, his grades started to change in school. Simply because his mom was like, that's not who you are. And so we identify with so many things and we find value in those things. And when we find value in those things, we say, that's who I am. And so after some time, I started realizing that's not who I am. I'm not like part of the world. I'm actually a Christian. I'm actually on the journey to follow God. And so as time went on, I was like, okay, this is my path. This is who you called me to be. That's what I'm going to become. Understanding the truth about who I really am. So that's kind of how it started. And understand, does that kind of answer what you...
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is a great answer. Yeah.
Yeah. So I started to grow in that. And I started realizing that your identity is laid by whatever foundation you have as a child. And this is why when people grow up, what do they face? Identity crisis.
Yeah.
They run into these problems and they're like, I'm trying to find who I am. If you actually just look at the journey of life, people are trying to discover who they are.
Yeah.
Like over and over because we've been identified by our upbringings. And so when we go through this process...
Well, yeah, I don't think I even had any clue of who I was until into my 30s.
There you go.
So, I mean, and for some people it's longer than that. Some people might get it quicker, sooner.
Yep.
But what I thought I was in my teenage years and my 20s, I realized that that's not who I am.
Yeah.
And, so it took me a while to understand that because I think you get more objectivity and more data over time
100%.
if you're open to it.
Yeah.
So, but maybe you can share a little bit about how one would go from maybe they identify as stupid, dumb, a drug addict, homeless, a failure, someone who can't hold together a marriage. I'm just a failure in relationships.
Yeah.
I'm a failure. Like how would one go about redefining themselves?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things we got to understand is competence breeds confidence. And when you're competent in who you truly are, you'll be confident in that person. So for example, if someone is like, hey, I'm struggling, I think I'm nobody, I'm worthless, I'm undeserving, I'm all of these things. Well, the thing is why do you believe that? And have there been moments that happened in your life that actually defined you to be that person? So I do this thing where I break down like there's a wall. If you have a wall of bricks, let's just say on each brick you have something that you've called yourself. Stupid, dumb, ignorant, whatever you want to put on that brick.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? You can't just reach in and remove the middle brick. Right? Like that's not how you destroy a house. You don't just remove the middle brick. There's a pattern that you have to follow. You can't even just pull in and reach that brick. So what you need to do is go to the foundation. Why is it that I believe the way that I believe? What determining factors actually happened in my life that made me believe the way that I believe? So I was just talking to someone and I was sharing with them. I said, hey, you're not addicted to what you think you're addicted to. You actually just don't understand the freedom that you have in Christ. And as I sat down with them, they were just like, no, I'm just not worthy. I'm not this, I'm not that. And I would ask them, why do you feel that way? And time after time, over and over again, every single person I've talked to, it's always been linked to childhood. Every single person. Because you hear these things, and it actually may not even be from your family. It can be from school. It can be kids walking around
your
saying,
peer group,
your peer group, people just telling you that you're not worth something. And then what you start to do is you take that and you start to value that. And then you associate it to something in your life and you say, yeah, they're right. So I'll use basketball for example.
So it's like confirmation bias with your own identity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's a huge confirmation bias. So I'll use basketball for example. When it comes to basketball, let's just say you're training, you're working, you're trying out, you're doing all of these things.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? During that time, you might get someone that says, hey, this person sucks at basketball. You get that word back. And then they say, man, you suck. You always miss these shots. You always do this. You know what you start to do? You start to say, wait, I do miss those shots. I do make those mistakes. And over, guess what it starts to do? It starts to lay those bricks.
Yeah, it compounds.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then what you have to do in order to overcome that is one, you have to identify where did I get that from? Where did that happen? Where did I first hear that I'm not worthy? Where did I first hear that I was stupid?
Do
Was it my sibling?
you find that sometimes it's hard to identify that one singular point?
Yeah.
Where it started? Because if it compounds over time, it seems like going back, reaching all the way back to the initiation of that might be challenging for some people, or no? Does it just take?
I think yes, it can be challenging. However, it just takes time. It's really, look, if I had to sum up what I do, it's really spiritual cognitive behavioral therapy. Because if you actually sit down with cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, they take you back into who are you?
Okay.
Where's
yeah,
your childhood?
Right, yeah.
What is that like? And they make you go deep. If you sit down and have therapy, it's literally like they dig deep. Where did you hear? Why do you believe that? Why do you think that about yourself? And so people start to say, well, I got to think about that. And this is why therapy goes on weeks and weeks at a time. But guess what we're doing in society? Go, 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 go,
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
And so you don't have time to reflect. You don't get to sit down and think, where did that start? Where did that come from? How did I start thinking that way about myself? Who was the person that told me that that's who I am?
Yeah.
And why did I accept that? And you look at what you associate that to. And I promise you, every single time, if you sit down and do this, you'll find it. Every single time.
Wow.
Without a shadow of a doubt.
Now, do you see some value in like daily, some people will call it prayer, others might call it meditation time, like having silence where you can actually work these things out?
100%.
Like, do you think this is a really important thing that if we're going to put into we're going to the gym, we're meal prepping, we have all these things, our job, we structure our day, but sometimes we lose sight of that. But that seems like such a pivotal part of our life and who we are that we should be front loading that in our day. Maybe even starting off our day with 5, 10, 50, something. Start somewhere. What would you suggest?
Yeah. So a lot of people, like, for example, if you want to sit down and do something and you want to do it for 30 minutes, you know what happens if you don't get 30 minutes? You don't do it at all. You just write it off.
Totally. I'm with you on this.
Like, I used to do this all the time. It's like...
I see it in the gym all the time.
Yeah, it's like
I don't have an hour to work out, so I just can't work out. It's worthless.
Yeah, so what we do is we write it off completely. But rather than saying, hey, what if I did this over time? And there's a famous quote. It goes something like this. Most people what is the word? They overthink what they can achieve in 1 year. So here it goes. Most people overthink what they can achieve in 1 year, and they underthink what they can achieve in 10. And so because of that mindset, we say, hey, I can't get an hour into the gym. I'm supposed to be fit in 90 days.
Yeah.
But because I couldn't do that in 90 days, forget 6 months, forget 1 year.
Yeah.
So we start writing it off. So the first thing I would say to do is that if you can't commit to 30 minutes or whatever time slot you thought you would like to commit to, don't write off less time, because slow progress is still progress.
Absolutely. Say that all the time.
And people don't think that.
Yeah.
In action. They're like, So that's the first thing I would say. If you can't reflect for sit down and reflect for 30 minutes. Like, I love nature. So I go out to nature and I'll sit down and I'll reflect, and I'll sit there for like an hour. And dude, so many things will come to your mind where you're just like, what in the world? I never even thought about that. And then you start sitting with your thoughts. And when you sit with your thoughts, you start to see where's the root to that issue. Because here's the thing. If you cut a tree and you just cut the branch off, or even at the top, it's going to grow back. You got to remove the roots. And it's the same thing with our issues on our identity. When we have problems, if we don't attack the root issue, it's just going to keep growing fruit. And so I would say sit down, take the time. If you can't, 1 minute. If you can't even do that, just say, hey, God, look, I know I need to do this. I don't want to. And I'm going to be real. I would love to, but I don't even want to find the time because I got other stuff that I can do. God help me. And just leave it there. And God will literally give you the strength to overcome those things.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the most important thing, is that people don't understand. If you had to ask someone, what is the biggest battle in the world? The biggest battle in the world is over the mind. Period.
Yeah.
Even if we're talking from a Christian standpoint, the battle is God wants your mind and Satan wants your mind. It's the biggest battle in the world. And I remember I used to work with professional athletes. I used to train NBA players. And during this time of my training, there was a saying that we would hear all the time in the gym. Train the mind and the body will follow.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Over and over again. And this is why professional athletes are able to perform how they perform, because they train their mind, they push through these things, and then it just becomes muscle memory.
Yep, and visualizing.
It's so important.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that even comes down to your Christian walk. Yeah. Visualizing who God truly says you are. Understanding who you truly are. Even your identity, same thing. Who are you? understanding the truth behind that, visualizing that I'm not stupid. I actually am smart. And even if you think you're stupid, can you find a moment in your life where you were truly stupid? Like, most people sit down and they can't even find that. They find what they think is stupid, not truly defined by stupidity.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I like this. It's like we talk about, and I'm going to keep doing, gym analogies, right? Because we talk about when we're lifting weights, progressive overload.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same thing here spiritually. It's like start with 30 seconds, make it a habit, and then it's amazing how that or a minute, you say, I'm going to sit down for 1 minute every morning. I'm going to pray. I'm going to meditate, whatever it is. You start with a minute.
Yep.
Then it's amazing how that minute turns into 2, turns into 3, a lot of times without your permission, because then you start to see value and feel value in what you're doing. And then that time that you're setting aside actually has a bigger value tag on it. And you're like, wow, 100%. This is actually helping. So, and I know that being still with your thoughts I got sold on this because I've spent over 3.5 years incarcerated, where I've had lots of quiet time to sit and think and work things out. I can tell you that coming out of long periods of being isolated, you can be broken or you can be very mentally strong.
Yep.
And having that stillness to really look deep and get below the surface on some of these things that are irritating you or holding you back is just tremendously valuable. And it seems to be individual for every person. For you, with your after that dream, and then you went to Bible college. So after that, what really sparked you to think? How did you know God wanted you to speak motivationally around the world?
Someone had told me something. They said, "Bro, you just have you have a crazy ability to demand attention when you speak, and people lock in." They like I learned so much hearing you. So I heard that a couple of times, and then I heard it from some really key figures in my life, and they were like, "Dude, you should run with this because you have this ability to paint an image for people, and everyone that hears it, they run and they're like, this changes my life."
All right, I'm hitting the brakes real quick because you just said something really good. What you just said is you heard someone say something, and it helped solidify in your mind like, oh, I am good at this. But the inverse is true as well, 100%. Right? 100%. So if you hear constantly, you're not worthy, this isn't you, your parents were scum, you're going to be scum, whatever that is, that becomes an identity to roll with. So shifting that into a positive, and you can tell, is this putting me down or is this bringing me up?
Yeah.
And then if once you get deeper, this is my opinion, once you get deeper in your walk with spirituality or with Christ, right? That's what I'll refer to. Then you start to feel stronger urges of is this really in alignment with what God wants for me?
Right.
And you can tell when you get deeper and deeper in prayer, you can tell is this really what God wants for me? Is it not? Sometimes it can be a up or down, but if it's a negative, probably not.
Yeah.
If it's helping other people, probably the goal.
Right. Yeah. And I think for me that was the biggest thing is service. What am I doing to serve people? Mm-hmm. And long story short, man, I've done so many endeavors, and I've built businesses. I've helped people build businesses, and I remember there was one time I was sitting there and I was just like, man, I got so much free time because I started literally gaining freedom. And as I gained my freedom, I would call friends and I'm like, hey, what's going on? How you doing? Oh, bro, I can't talk. I'm at work. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, dang. And a lot of people think when you start making money, it's like you're at the top, you're enjoying life, it's great. Dude, money is not meant to be made by itself. It's meant to bring people with you. Because when you start trying to connect with people, you're like, they don't even have the freedom that I have. Let me do what I need to do to go get them. Mm-hmm. And so I started realizing that, hey, I want to help bring some freedom to other people.
Yeah.
And I started doing that. And then I was like, wait, okay, this is cool. But at the end of the day, I'm not leaving a mark. What do I really want to do? And when I thought about hey, changing people's lives, literally increasing the population of heaven, helping people really see who they are and live better, I was like, man, there's no better feeling. I don't care. I could be the brokest person in the world. There's no better feeling than that. Helping people break chains, seeing that people are like, I have freedom now, is one of the most beautiful things to me. And so as people started to share that with me, hey, you really have this gift. And then I started traveling, going different places and speaking. And I was like, and people were like, dude, you really have a gift. And so I was like, dang, this is crazy. And you want to know what's crazy? I didn't realize till about 3 weeks ago that I really have a gift.
Huh.
I had a message that I wrote, and I saved it in my computer, and I switched computers, and it was supposed to be backed up on iCloud.
Ah, okay. So you had to freestyle something. Huh?
I freestyled one, and then I gave him another message, and I was like, man, this message is so key that I don't want to freestyle it. So I went back and I watched one of my messages that I had done a year ago, because it was the same message I was going to give. And I was like, man, I got to sit down and write notes. This is the crazy thing. I'm not even trying to toot my own horn, man.
Yeah.
I literally sat down, and I was supposed to be taking notes, and I forgot to take notes because it was so good.
Really?
I was listening to myself, and I was like, hey, like I was waiting for the next thing that I was going to say. And I was like, man, what? And I found myself, I paused it, I was like, dang, I'm not even taking notes because I'm listening to me.
Yeah.
Like, this is crazy.
Wow.
And I just shared that with somebody. I was like, for the first time, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I got to finally experience what you hear on the receiving end.
Yeah.
Because I never see that. You know, I never experienced
Probably
that.
to a less degree because you're hearing stuff you've already said.
Right, true.
So other people are hearing things for the first time that could be really like opening up their mind, you know?
Yeah, and when I hear these things, I'm like, dude, like I hear people, they come up to me and they're like, you changed my life. Like literally you changed my life. I spoke at a medical clinic about a year ago. And I spoke at this medical clinic and I was talking about identity. And I gave the whole illustration with laying bricks and things like that. And I actually did the actual strategy with them that I do, or the activity. And there was this lady, she came out and she went to her therapist. When she went to her therapist, she shared some things with her. And she said, what Calvin just shared changed my life. Like, I truly am not who I thought I was. Dude, this woman has been doing therapy for years. And it wasn't until I came in and shared the way that I shared that it was like, chains are broken. So the therapist came and shared that testimony with me. She was like,
that's awesome.
She said, I want to share this with you. And she said, the crazy thing is, I've been sharing what you shared with her from a therapeutic standpoint. But it wasn't clicking until you just shared.
Wow.
And she was like, the class actually said, can you come back and do another one?
Huh.
And I was like, okay, cool, let's do it. And I actually didn't have another one. So I had to write a second one for a 2-part for that. And so it helped me because it helped me develop a part 2 to that message. And but I was just so shocked. Like, here I am. I speak before, we're talking 8 years old to like 85.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's a wide audience.
And when you hear these people give you that feedback, you have to think of how many people are feeling that don't tell you that.
100%.
Don't share it with, I mean, that the amount of feedback you're going to get positive is going to be such a small fraction of the actual big picture work you're doing.
For sure. And I don't really, like, you get this small percentage of people coming up to you, but then even then, like, sometimes you're so locked in, you're like, dang, I'm speaking again tomorrow. You're thinking about this, you don't even hear exactly what they're saying to you.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, this was really good. It's like, okay, man, I'm glad you enjoyed that. Yeah, I'm glad. You know, but then like some days where I'm like fully locked in, let me hear what they have to say. And I'm like, man, this is deep. This is crazy. Like, I'm literally changing lives. And I have people that keep up with me now that email me and they'll touch base and they're like, dude, I heard you speak years ago and now I just heard you now. And you've grown so much.
Wow.
And you're still changing lives, changing my life. And I'm like, man, this is crazy. So, yeah, that's been my journey, man.
So let's just say we're at step 1. You're deconstructing these self-beliefs that you have that may be so deeply ingrained in you, right? So once we've deconstructed, we know, hey, I'm no longer this person. This is no longer who I really am.
Yeah.
What's the next step to find out who we are?
That's a great question, because what's going to happen is you're going to identify and you're going to say, I'm no longer this person. And it's going to feel good. And then a week later, it's going to swing back over you. And you're going to be like, wait, but this dude told me that if I do this, I will be able to have freedom. It doesn't work that way. Because think about this. If you've heard, let's just say you're 30 years old. Mm-hmm. If you've heard for 30 years over and over that you're stupid, that you're dumb, and all of these things. Well, think about it like a pile of dirt. If you have flat ground and you just throw some dirt there really quick. And then you keep doing that for 35 years.
Yeah.
Just because you go back to assess that one time, you're not removing 35 years of damage. You can't just remove dirt like that. Even if you got an excavator, you would still have to take that thing and dig that thing up multiple times, even though you're removing chunks.
Totally.
So it's a great question that you asked. So the next thing you got to do is, once you identify that, you have to realize that that's truly not who I am. Once you really truly believe that's not who I am, you go back to that same thing and you have to fill it. Because when you remove something, if you leave it void, it'll fill back in automatically.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
you have to replace that thing. And so we're judged by the company that we keep. There's a study that was done at Harvard. And they did this study, a 25-year study.
Oh,
And the
wow,
study's
this is a long study.
A long study. And the study showed this for 25 years. And they found that 99% of the people that were successful are judged and became successful based off of something known as a reference group. So what is a reference group? Well, they did this study and they saw that we are similar to iguanas in the fact that we absorb through our skin. So because we absorb through our skin, what is around us, we take that in. And so what they showed is that based on your reference group, the people that you're around will determine who you become. And so if you have people around you that's always saying negative things, even though it's not calling you stupid, they're saying negative things, well, guess what? You already have something there that's already empty that's going to get filled in with those negative things.
Yeah.
And when you have negative things, it's easy to go back and put those negative things in there. So
when you identify who you're not anymore, then and you truly believe, hey, I'm not that person anymore, but now I'm kind of in the crisis because I don't know who I am yet, but it's not that. Would the next step be find a good solid group?
yes.
People who are leading in a direction that you may want to go? I mean,
Yeah.
how would you identify what a solid group would be, or what type of environment to put yourself in?
Yeah, so one of the things that I tell people, like, for example, like when I'm mentoring people and I'm talking about, hey, what you want to do is you want to find your reference group or you want to find a mentor. When you find a mentor, you got to remember, whoever you find as a mentor, you will become like them.
Yeah.
So if you look at them and you say, I don't want to be this person, don't make that person your mentor. It's a waste of your time. So what you need to do is you want to sit down and say, hey, who do I want to become? So I do this strategy with people. I have them draw. Okay, in fact, you can do this strategy. I have them draw 2 lines on a paper, make 3 slots, and you write down the 5 closest people to you. And you write down the 5 closest people to you in the workplace, 5 closest people to you in your friend group, and 5 closest people to you in service. Service could be whether you're at church, whether you do you go to the Goodwill and you serve there, whatever it is. You want to take these people and you want to ask a series of questions. And some of those questions go like this. Are they going where I want to go? Do they believe how I want to believe? Do they think how I think? And if you can't say yes, then you need to reassess your 5 closest people. Because there's a saying and it goes something like this. Show me the 5 people around you and I'll tell you who you are.
Yes, I've heard this before.
So you can get 5
I've
people.
heard, show me your friends and I'll show you your future.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
That's another one. Show me your friends, I'll show you your future.
Yeah.
Simply because of the group that you're around. So when you think about people that do dumb stuff and also people that do good stuff, look at their reference group.
Yeah.
Someone that's going to rob a bank is not robbing a bank with a doctor.
Yeah.
That's not their group of people.
Yeah.
And so our group of people can literally either plunge us deeper or bring us higher. And we have to assess those things and look at, hey, how can I get better? And how can I make sure that I'm not part of that group?
It sounds almost similar, kind of adjacent to, if you've ever read Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah.
He talks about the mastermind group.
Yeah.
Right? Which is a little different than this, but seems similar. You want people who have the same focus and you can feed off each other in a business sense.
Yeah.
But this might be a little more in depth than that. But it seems, it reminds me of that, which I thought was a great book.
Yeah, which is a really good book. But you got to realize, this is like, Harvard did a 25-year study. Harvard doesn't do anything half done.
Yeah.
Like, they do it very well. For them to find that 99% of people that are successful is based on their reference group, you better believe that that's true.
Yeah.
And it's just, who do you associate yourself with? Now, some people are like, okay, this sounds cool, sounds good, but how do I just get rid of my friends that I had for 25 years? How do I even just
That
move
is,
on?
I can attest, that's extremely hard. Being someone in recovery who's been clean and sober.
Yeah.
You have such an attachment with these people.
Yeah.
That's the hardest thing. And I think that brings people back so often is before they're able to establish good, new, positive relationships.
Yeah.
Because we're people who like to be in company of other people. We don't want to be lonely.
Yep.
And you know you're accepted in that group. It's easy to fall back into that. So
very easy. And to highlight what you're saying, the key is that we have to remember as human beings, we're very relational. We're relational beings. And so we go to places where we feel accepted. Well, guess what? Your old group is probably who you feel accepted with. So this is why I tell people, join a community of whatever you need to do. Start going to a gym. Start going to a church. Start going, where are you trying to project yourself?
Yeah.
Who do you want to become? And once you find that out, start going to those places where those people are already becoming. And you'll automatically connect with people, and there will be people that you don't connect with, and that's perfectly fine. But what you have to do is reassociate yourself with a new group. If you're hanging out with people that drink, that smoke, and that's the life you're trying to overcome, well, guess what's going to happen? You'll go right back.
Yeah.
So you have to realize that, hey, I can't be that person anymore. And it's kind of like AA classes.
I was just going to use that same exact same thing. Yep.
The first thing they do in AA is identify that you are that thing. You are that thing. I am an alcoholic. Because so many people, we know what they do. Oh, I just drink once, I just drink twice. I'm not an alcoholic.
Yeah. They identify the problem.
Yeah, you identify the problem. The only thing is you can't stay there.
Yeah.
So now that you overcame, just as you identified that that's who I am, you need to also identify that that's who you're not anymore.
Yes.
So it's the same exact thing. Hey, when you overcome that, you're like, no, I'm not an alcoholic. No, I'm not this. Because that's the same thing with visualization. Who are you? Where are you going? What are you becoming?
Yep. And then you get a new friend group. That's why they say
a new friend group.
Keep going to meetings. Keep going to meetings. You keep going to meetings. You meet new people. These people are sober. They're clean. You start hanging out with them. You start admiring the things they're doing in their personal lives or their work lives. And that starts to grow. And then, of course, the other thing to stay sober is service, which goes back to what you said. You said it a few minutes ago.
Those three groups.
Yeah. Having a sense of service to others brings our self-esteem, just skyrockets it when you know you're out there helping other people.
Yep.
So there's something in giving back.
Yep.
And I don't know what that is. I can't really define why that works.
Yeah.
But there's something about it that works. When you're being of service of other people, there's something about that helps you spiritually.
Yeah. Yeah. It really in service, man, it's important to be in service because you give. And the thing is, I was just telling someone that's married, and they were like, man, how do I figure this thing out with marriage? And I was like, look, man, if you met all of her needs and she met all of yours, there would be no need to be selfish because your needs were being served.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing in service, is that you're meeting other people's needs. And when you meet other people's needs, man, there's something that brings you joy. And it's like, I get filled helping people. Like for me, man, when I see people, like one of the things to this day, and being vulnerable, one of these things to this day that makes me cry is seeing someone get baptized, give their life to God. Especially if they're on the journey of recovery or on a journey of becoming better and they really had a hard time. Dude, it's something I'm like I try to hold back and I'm just like, dang, this is just so deep.
Yeah, I feel that because I have been a devout, I wouldn't consider myself an atheist. I was a devout atheist, Christian hater. I thought the whole thing was ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I would look at people and think, how are you so smart? You seem so smart, but you believe this crap.
Yeah, yeah.
And I felt like I was like that. Well, I'm 39, and I felt like that until I was about 32.
Wow. So
something changed. It wasn't like in an instant, but my mind started to be open that, wait, maybe I got this wrong.
Yeah.
And little, that's for a different time I could share that.
Yeah.
But, the change that's happened in me is so 180 that when I see it in other people, it's just so powerful because I understand when people are the doubters and when they say that stuff to me, it doesn't bother me because I understand. I understand why you feel that way. I used to feel that way too.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, that's why I like to, if I have these conversations, I try to meet people where they're at.
Yeah.
And let them know hey, I totally understand why you think that, but let me share with you why I think otherwise now.
Yeah.
Right?
It's the relatability.
Yeah.
One of the things I tell people always remember, connection breeds ground for correction. Connect before you correct. And what we do so many times, we try to correct with no connection. We try to correct before we connect.
Now, why is that? Why do you want to have the connection before the correction?
Because who are you to tell me that I should stop doing something? I don't know you. Don't try to come tell me what I should stop doing. But if I'm spending time with you, we're connecting. I see that you actually have my best mind and interest.
Yeah.
So you connect it. So I want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
And then it gives you the ability to correct me. And then
it's more well received that way, right?
100.
Yeah, your guard's down. You're willing to actually truly listen to what someone has
100%.
to say. 100%. Yeah.
I use it. There's a principle called the money in the bank principle. And I tell people this, and you can take this literally and share it with everyone. There's a principle called the money in the bank. And what this is that every person that you meet, you have a certain amount of money in the bank with them, period. And every time you talk to them, you deposit, every single time. But every time you rebuke them, or every time you correct them, you withdraw. Well, here's the problem. If you deposited $1 million, let's say you know a person for 10 years, you deposited $1 million, but the rebuke is going to cost you 1.1 million, you probably shouldn't do it because you're going to go negative. And now you're in that hole, and guess what? It might take you forever to get that 100,000 paid off in that hole to get back to ground zero.
Yeah, that's great. That paints a great picture. I love that.
And so people got to realize is that
we got to make some deposits.
You got to make
before we start making some corrections.
100%. Yeah. Because you're going to withdraw every time you correct.
Yeah.
And if you withdraw too much, then you're negative.
Totally.
And now that you're so deep in the hole, that person might be so hurt and damaged by what you did that they're like, bro, you're not recovering from that 100,000 for a long time.
Yeah, your account's closed here.
Yep. And then guess what? Even once you recovered, you still only got back to flat ground.
Yeah.
You're not even positive.
Yeah.
You're still at zero. So even after that took a couple of years to get back, you still can't correct again.
Yeah.
And so that's the money in the bank principle.
Oh, I like that. That's really good. Have you written any books?
So I'm working on one right now.
Okay. You got to have a chapter called Money in the Bank Principle.
Yeah.
If you could dive into that, that'd be pretty powerful.
Yeah.
So just to take a turn from the serious note, do you have like a time that you were in front of people that you were speaking? Like, what would be your most powerful moment that like you really felt like on stage or even right afterwards?
Yeah.
And then what's your most embarrassing moment?
Oh, dang. Okay, so check this out. One time I was in Africa and I was speaking. I was in Kenya. And we were speaking in this place called Nakuru. And this is one of the most powerful experiences I had. There was a guy that was outside. There was about between 1,000 to 2,000 people, 1,000 to 2,000 people there. And I was speaking. And every day, right before I would get on stage, I was like, I want to help the community, and the cost of the weight of the US dollar compared to their currency was just so good. And so I was like, every day, look, I'm speaking at a place that is outside in the middle of a market. And there's a stage and it's dirt every single day. And I shared that because I would have these guys clean my shoes every single day. But it's dirt. It was nonsense. But I was connecting with the people. Mm-hmm. And so there was this guy who was a shoe cleaner, 2 of them. And I would get my shoes cleaned, and I was speaking there for like 18 days or something like that. And it wasn't every day, but it was like 18 days, and they had me booked for specific days. And so I would speak, and every day I would go, I would get my shoes cleaned. So one guy, he comes up, he's like, yo, man, you always going to him to get your shoes clean. Come over here, too. I was like, hey, no problem. So I went to both, and I switch off on and off. Well, every day he would show up to my seminar that I was doing. He would show up every single day, and when he showed up, he was drunk every single time. And I was like, man, that brother's probably not listening at all. He probably don't even care. At the end, he came every single day because I was in the market, and that's where he cleans shoes. So he has to be there every day. Yeah. The entire time I thought he wasn't listening. He comes up at the end with tears in his eyes, and he says, I heard what you were saying. And somehow the Holy Spirit was able to penetrate this brother beyond his inebriation. And he was just like, thank you so much for sharing that. And he started to share with me what I was saying every day.
So you knew that he was listening.
I didn't know at that point.
No, but now you do.
I knew
he was really listening.
I was like, dude, like that's when it clicked. I was like, dang, he was really listening.
Yeah.
And at the end, he was like, I want to be baptized. And he gave his life to God.
Wow, that's
amazing. Dude, I was like, what in... you just don't write people off.
Totally.
You think every single day this dude is coming, he's drunk. I mean, he's drunk, bro. Like, we're not talking like, oh, he's a little tipsy. We're talking like, hey, let me clean your shoes, you know?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Like, he's gone.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I got you, man. And then, like, after some time, the guy that came over, he's like, no, he started arguing with him. And I'm like, yo, no, it's okay. We'll do every other day.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, whatever. You know, and I just thought, like, at that point, you don't really think, like, you don't sit down with your thoughts to be like, yeah, this is good stuff. You're just there.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow, man, he was able to know my messages.
Wow.
And he ended up giving his life to God at the end.
That's powerful.
So that was like,
That's
that's probably the biggest, most powerful thing that I've experienced. As far as the most embarrassing one, man, what's the most embarrassing experience that I've had where I went on stage? Actually, okay, it was very recent, actually.
Oh, really?
Very recent.
Oh, okay.
I went up and I was speaking. And when I speak, I just have my iPad. It depends on what I'm doing. Like, I did a TED Talk style conference one time, and you can't have notes at all.
Oh, okay.
And so, like, it just depends on where I'm speaking. And I had my iPad, and I didn't charge it. And I needed my notes so bad for that message because there was a lot of content, but a lot of steps. Like, hey, do this, do that.
Oh, yeah.
Read this book, do this. And I was just like, I don't want to miss any step. And I'm speaking in the middle, and my iPad says 10%. And I'm like 10 minutes into my hour talk. And I was like, oh, snap. And I'm sitting there, and I was like, wait, no, earlier I spoke. My iPad was at 40%, and now it's at 33%. So I was like, yo, I can do this. That's fine. It only used 7%.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
like, I'm good. So I didn't charge it for that reason. Well, then I saw it say 10%, and then I saw the little thing load, and then boom, it powered off.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, snap. And you know, when you're speaking or when you're doing anything, you got to be confident.
Yeah.
And you got to make sure you don't show the audience that you are as lost as them.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, dang. And so I'm like going, and I have a slideshow at this point with this one, and I'm like clicking, and I'm like,
But the slideshow kind of saves you a little bit,
it
right?
saves me a little bit, but it doesn't have my notes.
Oh, okay.
So I'm seeing what the audience is seeing, and normally I need my notes to see what's up next. And so I'm super familiar with it, so I'm still kind of getting by. And I'm like, from the stage, I got to play it off. And I see one of the guys in the audience who's one of the helpers, and I look at him, and I'm like trying to cue him, like, yo, come get my iPad. And I'm like, he's not getting the cue. I'm like, oh, snap. I'm trying to do all this at the same time while still doing my presentation.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to make sure the people in attendance aren't there. Like, I mean, aren't
aware,
aren't catching,
aren't
aware of what's happening. And eventually I get him, and he comes, and I hand the iPad, and everything is super smooth. Some people caught on, but when I got to that moment, I just started shifting to stories, because stories is really where you can like hone in on a lot of like key things that you're trying to bring out. And I've also been doing it so long, but moral to the story is charge your iPad.
Yeah. Be prepared, right?
Yeah, be prepared,
I know.
Man. And
well, that's good. If that's the most embarrassing, that's you're doing pretty good.
That's probably the most embarrassing one, because I prepare really hardcore. And one of the reasons I prepare so hard is because I work in Hollywood, and they're like to the T. Like, everything is perfect. It's crazy. And so I prepare so much. I go in and I visualize my audience. Before the audience comes in, even if I don't know how many people are going to be there, I visualize the audience. I visualize kids running up, interrupting me. How do I respond?
Oh, yeah, that's good.
You know, like, because you don't want to respond to that on the direct contact. Like, you want to be able to respond to that. I look at the audience. I look to the right. I look to the left. I'm looking at how I step off the stage, because I have this thing where half of my foot is off the stage, and you can fall off the stage if you don't get that right.
Yeah.
And so I go in, I test the stage, I step back. Sometimes I'll have like a backdrop behind me, and I'm like, okay, how big is this backdrop? I step back 1, 2, and I'm visualizing. I got 6 steps. I got step. So I prepare so much and so detailed that it has helped me mitigate having a lot of failures.
Yeah, totally. 'Cause
Yeah.
I think that's the thing, is if you visualize it ahead of time,
Yep.
you've already pretty much been there already.
Yeah.
So
Failing
if
to
you lose
prepare
your
is
way,
preparing to fail.
yeah, exactly, and
Yeah.
that's true for everything, right?
Absolutely. And
So, what would you say the biggest audience you've spoken to, or biggest venue you've been at? What would
probably
that
the
be?
biggest venue that I've been at is 5,000.
Oh wow, that's
Yeah,
pretty big.
probably 5,000.
Wow.
That's the biggest venue. But once you hit 1,000, everything's the same.
Yeah, there's no difference.
Yeah, it's really no difference, right?
Yeah.
I'm speaking at this big conference coming up in August this year, and I don't know how many people are going to be there, but it's a big forum. Like they're actually renting out the convention center
Oh wow.
in the city, and so I don't know how big that one's going to be, but yeah, probably 5,000.
So that's
probably the
pretty
biggest.
big.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting,
Yeah.
because public speaking is one of those things that so many people, it's like they're one of their biggest
It's
fears.
the biggest fear in the world.
Yeah, it is, right? Is
It
it?
is.
I knew it was. I knew it
Number
was
one.
one. Is it the number one?
More than death.
Wow.
People fear speaking in public.
Okay, wow, that's crazy. I knew it was up there. I didn't know it was number
Yeah,
one.
number
But
one.
it's funny because that's one of the things that doesn't bother me. Like,
Yeah.
and I've never spoken in front of 5,000 people.
Right.
But anytime I have to speak in front of 50, 100, it never bothers me.
Yeah. And I think one of those reasons is because you're prepared, right? Competence breeds confidence.
Yeah.
And when you're competent in whatever you're speaking on, you're going to be confident when you share it. And the biggest thing for me, I've always looked at is like, everybody in this audience is believing me. You better make sure everything you said is fact checked.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
they're going to fact check it if you don't.
Yeah.
And you're going to look bad if they bring that to you.
Mm.
And so for me, I'm always just like, I'm always seeing updates. Like recently I did a presentation and I was sharing statistics about how many schools are in the world and how many Christian locations there are. And I did an update. Literally the day of the message I was giving, I did an update. And I was like, how many Christian schools are here? How many are in the world? And what is the presence of that?
Yeah.
And you have to have those numbers.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
Yeah.
So would you say you said around 2010? Is that when that dream happened?
2012 is when that dream happened.
Oh, okay. And has
Yep.
your walk with God just gotten stronger and stronger since
Stronger
then?
and stronger. You know, yeah, it's definitely gotten stronger and stronger. But I also, here's the thing, even as a Christian, there's things that we identify and we look at that become part of our identity that is not correct.
Mm.
And so that journey has been breaking chains even for me. And when I started developing this new message on identity, it was just less than 2 years ago.
Wow.
Because God was just showing me, hey, I got something different. I got something more. And I was just like, oh my goodness. Like, it's kind of like, if you read the Bible, you can read the same thing over and over. And then you see something different every single time.
Yeah.
And it's just
Or
because...
it finally clicks.
Or it finally clicks.
Yeah.
And so recently that started happening to me with the identity message.
Wow.
And so, yeah, 2012. But then even then, my journey with God is just continuous. It never stops.
Yeah.
It's like a slack line, You fall, you get back up and keep going.
Yeah, well, we definitely fall. Even
100%.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's times that I'm feeling really strong, and there's times that I'm not feeling very strong.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things you said earlier is key, because having people in my friend group or my corner that maybe they're at a strong point in their walk in their life,
Yeah.
and maybe mine's tapering, and when I get around them, it helps bring me back up, right?
Yeah.
And helps remind me like what's really important. What am I focusing on? Why am I focusing on what God's not doing for me instead of focusing on the things that He is doing for me?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then leaning into that, right?
Yeah. And to add on to what you're saying, we fall, right? We fall on this journey. But one thing that I recently just saw about less than 2 years ago was one of the reasons we fall actually the core reason we fall comes back to identity. What are the two things that hold us back in life and in growing with Christ? The two things are, one, the lies we believe about God, and two, the lies we believe about ourselves. I promise you, every single time you fall,
Great
you'll find
stuff.
it. Every single time. And I'll give you an example. I was talking to someone, and they were talking about paying their tithe.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, I don't know about paying my tithe. And I was like, okay, I totally understand. Why do you feel that you shouldn't pay your tithe? Always ask that question, why? Why does someone do what they do? And I said, why do you feel you shouldn't pay your tithe? Or you don't want to pay your tithe? And they said, well, I don't want to give to the pastor who's going to buy a private jet and all this stuff. And I was like, in my head, I'm like, that's a smokescreen. Let's go a little deeper.
Yeah, for sure.
And I was like, I was like, so what if God told you, no matter what your pastor does, pay your tithe? Would you pay it? And they were like, well, why should I pay my tithe when I can't even afford to pay my rent? And I said, boom, we're getting deeper.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with your pastor
Yeah.
and everything to do with you. So I started going deeper and I started asking them. I said, okay. I said, but what if God said, I'll take care of you? And so I said, there's two lies. The lies we believe about God and lies we believe about ourselves. And I said, one of the lies you probably believe about God, and I said, you can correct me if I'm wrong. One of the lies you probably believe about God is that he cannot provide for you beyond the income that you make. Therefore, I won't pay my tithe. And the second thing is, the lie you believe about yourself, I'm just not at that level with God for him to do that for me yet. And those two things are holding you back.
Ah, that's great.
Silence.
That's great.
Literally.
Yeah.
They went silent. And they told me, they said, no, I think that I do understand. And I said, okay, so what would you say? And they said, well, you're telling me that if I can't pay my rent, I should pay my tithe. Like, I mean, if I can't pay my rent, I should still pay my tithe? And I said, well, that's not what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is the principle behind why you're not doing it.
Yeah.
It's really because the lie you believe about God and the lie you believe about yourself. And then they shifted and they said, so what if someone makes $5,000? I think they were talking about themselves.
Yeah.
They're like, what if somebody makes $5,000 and they need to, right after they finish paying paying for all their bills, food and stuff like that, they only have $100 left. They didn't pay their tithe, which should have been 10%. They didn't even have enough. You would tell them pay their tithe? I said, no, I wouldn't tell them pay their tithe because their issue is not tithing. Their issue is that they don't trust God. So the issue, like, we look at the surface, but we got to go to the root. And the issue is not that that person doesn't want to pay their tithe, because if they had enough, they would pay them. It's they don't trust God. And so what I would do is I wouldn't tell them pay their tithe. I would actually give them a Bible study on why God is love and why you can actually trust him. And once you come to that conclusion, guess what you'll do by default? Pay your tithe. Because it's easy. Why? Because I no longer believe the lie about God and the lie I believe about myself. And then you'll see God start
Opening
to
more opportunities for you.
100%.
For more income or for more ways to save on some of your other spending or
exactly.
whatever it is, right?
Yeah,
You'll
and
see
like,
these doors open.
You'll see all these doors open. And what we do, man, we put God in a box. And we think that God is limited by our restrictions. Dude, I know so many people. There's some people that I know that's like, I'll pay my tithe no matter what. I know this actual powerful testimony, this person paid their tithe, and it was actually the same amount to pay their rent or their mortgage. And they were like, I'm going to pay God.
Wow.
They actually went to pay their mortgage the next month. And they asked, hey, how much do I owe? Nothing. And they said, what do you mean I never paid it? They said, well, it's paid already. Someone else paid it for them. Wow. Dude, we can't limit God by our personal
I've heard a lot of stories like that. I've heard a lot of stories like that.
The thing is we don't hear those stories as much because we don't have the faith. And the reason we don't have the faith, we believe a lie about God and a lie about ourselves.
Very good.
Every single time.
So something, because this is such a condensed conversation.
Yeah.
If there was something that we could, one or two tips that you could give the audience that's listening on how to, better succeed at life, how would you break that down?
Yeah. How can I better succeed at life? In every avenue is 1, understand who you are. 2, identify lies that you believe about yourself and the lies you believe about God. And understand why you believe those. And actually, for every lie you believe about God, there's actually a Bible verse that's contrary to that. It's crazy. Wow. Every single lie you believe about God. And one of the reasons people are atheists is because they believe lies about God.
Yeah.
I've met so many atheists, I'll ask them, like, why are you atheist? You're telling me that a God that wants to burn me in hell forever exists? Nope. Wrong God, you see.
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time, like, people will be like, hey, like, why would I serve a God who's going to burn me in hell because I don't listen to him? And I'll tell people, I'll say, hey, I know you feel how you feel. And if that truly was the same God that I believed in, I'd be atheist too.
Yeah.
I actually affirm them in what they believe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's just a lie that they believe about God.
But you also kind of deposited money in their bank.
100%. Right? That's true. That's true. Yeah. So that would be my biggest thing. Identity. What is your identity? Find the root. And then also, what are the lies you believe about yourself and the lies you believe about God? I'm stupid. That's a lie that you believe about yourself. Show me evidence that you're stupid. You just passed the ACT. You just graduated high school. Okay, you didn't graduate high school. You graduated elementary. Show me that you're stupid. we have to identify where did that come from, because that's not reality. And so some people, what we do in life is we start doing things to get the validation from other people, when in reality the only validation you need is from God. That's the only validation you need, is from God. How does God see me?
So next question is for anyone listening here that's wanting to get a deeper walk with Christ, or maybe they have one and they just wanted to get stronger. What would be the first step to really strengthening that relationship, or even the open-mindedness to be willing to accept the fact that maybe there is someone to have a relationship with?
Yeah, I think the first thing we got to remember about God is that God doesn't, his focus is not to stop you from doing what you're doing. His focus is to show you how good he is. And when you see how good he is, you'll start to transition your life. And so a lot of people think like, man, if I go to God, he's going to take this from me. If I go to God, he's going to do this. God never takes anything from you without giving you something better. And so there's always this swap. There's always a replacement. And so I think the first thing we need to do, if we're going to get closer to God, if we're going to draw, and we're like, I want to do this, I think the first thing is very simple. Go to God, say this prayer, simple. God, say this simple prayer. Lord, I submit my will to you, that you may will and do of your good pleasure. Amen. End your day. Go do what you need to do. And every single day.
Do that repeatedly every day.
Every day. Why? Because you have a will, I have a will, but they're broken. And so our wills are broken. Since humanity fell, our wills are broken. Well, guess what? God has power. You have a will. So when you submit your will to God, he takes it, he adds some power to it, gives it back to you, and now you have willpower.
Nice.
So I got to submit that to God.
Yeah.
And when I do that, he'll give it back to me. I have willpower. And you'll literally, I kid you not, you'll literally see throughout your day, God show up every single time.
Wow.
So,
oh man, this was great.
Yeah.
This conversation was awesome.
Yeah.
I loved having you on. I feel like we could totally do a part 2.
Man,
we're kind of out of time right now.
For sure,
But this was great. I'm super excited for the audience to hear what you have to say.
Yes.
You had a lot of things that resonated with me. And I loved it, man.
Yeah, man. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you.
It. Yeah.
All right. And where can we find you on social media?
On social media, on Instagram, find me on @CalvinGardnerMotivation on Instagram. And on YouTube, you can find our podcast, Go Beyond Podcasts. And you can also go to my website, gobeyondwithcalvin.com, if you're looking for opportunities to collaborate. And yeah, that's where you can find me.
Cool. Do you do any one-on-one coaching?
I do.
You do?
I do, but I haven't, because my schedule is so crazy, I've kind of like, I'm going to slow down a little bit. But I do one-on-one coaching, yeah.
Wow, that's great. I think that'd be great for anyone who is struggling with self-identity or wants to even just bring themselves to the next level. Reach out to
100%.
Calvin. He's got some good stuff, man. Unfortunately, we only have this much time, an hour.
Yes.
But I would love to perhaps have you back, and we could really dive deeper into
Let's do it.
Into the Christian faith and your walk, and maybe some more history behind that.
Let's do it.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
All right.